If you spend enough time around cars, you're bound to wind up with some crash stories. And over the years here on VINwiki, we have had some crazy ones. So for today's video, I've compiled our top 10 supercar crash stories into a single episode for you to enjoy. And today's video is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp makes therapy easier, more accessible, and more affordable than you could possibly imagine. They give you the ability to connect with a professional in whatever way is comfortable for you. I hope you'll take a moment today to think about whether or not you could benefit from finding someone to talk about whatever's going on in your life. Last year, I tried BetterHelp for the first time because I was going through some things in my marriage and I just needed some perspective from a professional to help me get past some issues that I was working through. But whatever you're going through, whether it's a relationship, a work issue, depression, anxiety, BetterHelp can help with their amazing team of professionals. So visit betterhelp.com/VINwiki now to save 10% on your first month, or just click the link at the description below. And here are our top 10 VINwiki supercar crash stories. Have a great day.
It's not 2 cops anymore, it's like 6 cops now, and everybody's lights are going off, and this is startling him. Of all of the Ferrari supercars, 288 GTO, F40, F50, Enzo LaFerrari, the craziest story has to be the FBI F50. So this story starts with a car owner who's going through a divorce and he needs to split up his collection to divide assets. So his F50 is on consignment at Algar, serial number 103494. And that's where this story, that's where all of the craziness begins. Some guy shows up, he's interested in the F50, he looks the part, he looks like a guy who's there to buy a car. He doesn't show them anything, he doesn't prove anything, he doesn't give them access to bank records, he doesn't show them a license. He talks the best game ever, and he convinces them to let him test drive this F50, one of 349 ever made, one of 50 some odd cars in the US. So they take this car out, and the salesman is driving the car for, let's say, the first 10 minutes, showing the guy how to shift it and steer it and what's good. And they pull over, and they're about to switch seats. The salesman gets out. He goes around the back of the car, maybe the front of the car. The guy in the passenger seat, he jumps up, and he jumps into the driver's seat, and he puts it in gear, and he takes off. This car disappears. Everyone thinks it's going to Asia or South America or Africa. They think that this car is gone, it's with some drug lord or some crazy person, and we will never see it again. And all the while, for 5 years or so, it was quietly being driven right here in Middle America. I've been tracking Ferraris for 20 years now, or almost 20 years now, and a lot of it comes from people who contact me and say, hey, I just bought this car, this is the serial number, you know, here's the information so you can update your records, this is the current mileage, etc. Some people contact me before they buy a car, and they say, hey, listen, I'm thinking about buying this car, and I'd like to know what you have on it before I pull the trigger. So when this car came up for sale, a gentleman in Tennessee contacted me and said he wanted to buy it. His name is Jazz Beer, and he sent me the VIN with a different serial number, 104359. And when I looked it up in my database, it was blank. As it turns out now, we have learned it is a right-hand drive F355 in Australia. But at the time, it was completely blank in my database. And I was so excited to add this hitherto unknown F50 to my database that I'd never stopped for a second to just run the VIN through a site like redheaded.com to confirm that the check digit was correct. When he first sends me the VIN, I was super excited. I had an F50, this was an F50 about which no one else knew. Everybody who collects Ferrari serial numbers knows all of the F50s. Ferrari made 349 official cars. There are, I think, 389 total with a bunch of post-production prototypes. But when Jazz sent me this VIN and I look at the serial number and it's blank in my database, I was beside myself. No one else had this F50. I was so excited. Instead of just looking up the VIN, I immediately put it in my database and put it as a new F50. And that was a huge mistake. Since I had no reason to intervene, since I wasn't mature enough to stop and check the VIN to make sure the check digit was correct, I left it alone. And I told Jazz, hey, I don't have any history on this car, but, good luck with the purchase. I hope everything goes well. And that was in May 2008. And 3 months later, he bought the car and he was trying to get it registered at the DMV. He was trying to register it with the Ferrari Club of America. And there was some suspicion and some investigations. And it was determined that the car was stolen. So Jazz reaches out to me on 13 May 2008 about the car, about wanting to pull the trigger. Exactly 3 months later, 13 August 2008, the FBI has possession of the car. They've arrested the gentleman who stole the car and had it for sale and sold it to Jazz. They've taken possession of the F-50, during which one of the agents decided when the car needed to be relocated from one facility to a courthouse facility, instead of transporting the car, one of the agents decided he would get into the car and drive it there himself. So without any experience on how to drive a Ferrari supercar, on cold, old tires no less, he takes this thing out and he mashes the gas pedal and he spins the car and cracks it so hard that he cracks the tub. So not long after this guy in the FBI crashes this car, I get a call from Jamie Hoxie in the Justice Department regarding the car. She wants to know the value of the F-50 before it was crashed by this FBI agent and the subsequent value of the F-50 after an FBI agent completely destroyed it. So I gave her what information that I could. After the FBI concludes their investigation of the theft of the F-50, they put it up for sale. Because it's destroyed, it's damaged, the tub is damaged, it's done. It only sells at Copart for about $340,000, which is about, I guess, half the value of an F-50 back then. Either the original owner who was consigning it at Algar, or Algar, someone's insurance still wanted to recoup what they lost when that car was stolen. So after the FBI crashed the car, the insurance company who insured the car at the time of the theft sued the FBI to recoup as many damages as they could after the FBI destroyed the car, but a judge ruled in favor of the FBI and threw the case out. So that fateful phone call from Jazz was not the first time that this car's fate could have changed trajectory. Back in 2006, 2007, when it was still actively stolen, being driven around by Tom H. Baker, the JetBlue pilot who stole the car. He had it registered on Kentucky plates that said F-50. He displayed the car at the Kentucky Keeneland Concours d'Elegance. And then one day he calls his friend Rex Tyler and he says, hey, listen, I'm going out of town for a week. Would you mind babysitting the F-50 for me? And so Rex is like, of course, I'd love to. No problem at all. Tom Baker drops the car off at Rex. Rex told the story on Ferrari Chat, and then years later he contacted me, or he messaged me on Facebook and told me some additional details. He said when he went out to lunch and when he got back to work, the F-50 was already at his job in the parking lot, sitting there, gleaming red, just waiting for him to drive this thing around for a week. So after work, he takes the car, he's driving around, he notices a cop car behind him, and he figures, all right, the cop thinks I'm gonna speed, so I'm just gonna take it easy, and he just cruises down the road, and before long, he sees a second cop car behind him. So I go, okay, maybe the guy called his buddy, you gotta come check this out, and a few minutes later, the cherries go off and he gets pulled over. So he pulls over, he's like, hey guys, how's it going? You know, what seems to be the problem? Now, I wasn't speeding, I was just cruising along. It's not 2 cops anymore, it's like 6 cops now. And everybody's lights are going off and this is startling him. So they tell him that he pulled off out of the gas station without paying for gas. When the cop spoke to the lady at the gas station, she was like, no, I knew there was some sort of issue. I knew it wasn't, foul play, because when I saw that car, I was like, I know a $60,000 car when I see one, and that's real money right there, and somebody wouldn't just pull off out of a gas station in a $60,000 car. And he's like, you're thinking of somebody else. That wasn't me. I didn't fill up for gas. And the cop's like, no, I saw the video camera. I saw the engine inside the window in the back. It was definitely this car. And Rex was thinking, maybe you saw some other different car. And that's when he realized, you know what, let me call Tom and find out what's going on. So he calls Tom. Tom hasn't left town yet. And he's like, Tom, I just got pulled over. I'm driving this F50. I just left work and I got pulled over. And Tom is like shitting a brick on the phone. He's like, okay, what's going on? What do you mean? What's happening? They're saying I pulled out of a gas station without paying? And Tom is like, oh, thank God. It's like, oh, okay, I was on the phone when I was filling up. I must have forgot to pay. I'm gonna run down there and pay right now. The cops keep Rex on the side of the road with the F50 for, I guess, a little while Tom runs down to the gas station and pays for the gas. Then the gas station calls the cops, tells the cops, okay, everything's fine. The guy came in and paid for it. So they let Rex Tyler go with the F50. Had they just run the VIN or checked it or something, I guess they couldn't have, even if they did run the VIN. It was already registered in Kentucky. It was right there. It was right there. And I bet the Kentucky cops wouldn't have been so brash as to drive it from one location to another. And they probably would not have crashed it like the FBI crashed it.
And then I crashed it twice. The very first time I set my sights on a Diablo, it was specifically a Diablo, and that actually plays through the whole story because it was an uncompromised view on what car I wanted, was 1992, Guinness Book of World Records. It was a picture of a flat triangle car. I didn't know what that was. And I was obsessed with it then, and then I read that it was 42 inches tall, something along those lines. 202 miles an hour was the top speed, and I was like, someday I'm going to buy that car, and I'm going to go 200 miles an hour. That was 92. I started my computer business in 2002 and didn't make any money until 2011, 2012, and that's when I traveled down to Atlanta because of a very helpful salesperson that enabled me to find the right path to purchasing that car. I had gone to Lamborghini of Ohio, and the sales guy did the exact opposite thing. I came in there saying, I want a Lamborghini Diablo. And he's like, you mean you want a Gallardo? And I just stood there like, no, this is my dream car. And he goes, well, this one's going to be more reliable, and it's going to hold its value better, and it's easier to work on. None of that was what the second grader in me wanted. I wanted the Lamborghini doors. I wanted the V12. I wanted the 202 miles an hour. That's all that mattered. There was a listing for a yellow Diablo. It was the DuPont registry, a 6-liter. And I didn't even have my sights set on a 6-liter. It was a 92, one of the early ones, the black one. That was what actually had my heart. But a 6-liter the last year of the car, I thought, you can't get any better than that. And so, I had called down to Ed, and I think it was how inviting, or at least just, I was treated with respect. Like, he didn't know me, but he was giving me all the information necessary to make that possible. I had just enough money for the down payment. I had done that before I actually done my due diligence of how I was going to afford the rest of it. I'd played in the stock market and made like $50,000 in one day and then lost 80 the next in penny stocks. I'm like, okay, that was a really, really bad idea. So the extra money I had to put more than just whatever it was, I think $40,000, $38,000 down, I lost all of it. And so I ended up struggling really hard, playing it cool. Like, yeah, I'll have we're having some issues with, wiring the money. I'll figure it out. And there was patience on the other end of that phone, more than was necessary. I ended up making it possible. And then on Ed's end, he ended up helping find the right financing option. And of course, I think it was ended up working out to be like 10% APR. If you really did the numbers kind of backwards, I didn't lead without thinking, but I just knew, is that interest? And it ended up being like $40,000 in interest over the life of the relationship. I'm like, that was worth it to me because that was what I wanted. It was really weird because YouTube was not a major part of my life. It was, in fact, just a very, very small piece, but it ended up being a very pivotal piece because my computer business, I paid myself very little. It was really what was left over after paying employees and rent and whatnot. From a business standpoint, that was what you do. That's how you do it. But to try and purchase an exotic, that's not what you do. And so it ended up being that the revenue, the couple dollars a month that I was getting from YouTube, was enough to push me over the threshold of being capable of financing the vehicle. My brother and I booked a flight down to Atlanta, and Ed picked us up in a V10. It was some sort of Audi. We pull up to Lamborghini of Atlanta, and I'm trying to like poker face it. I'm trying to be all, let's do the paperwork. And I look over, and the Diablo is in the showroom, and I'm like shaking. And I'm like, okay, paperwork. And then I think I asked Ed if it came with a warranty, and he just kind of looked at me and there was no good answer to that. There shouldn't be an answer to that. But I'm like, okay, well, can you at least guarantee that the car will make it to Michigan? Because my plan was to buy it in Atlanta and 660 miles later, drive it all the way back to Michigan in one shot. I bought it sight unseen, no test drives. And most of my cars have been that way. I've been very fortunate with that. I was so nervous when we did like a real quick loop. I don't remember how the car felt. I just loved. I was in love with the car. And I remember I didn't hate it, and it's weird to test drive a vehicle that you're now enslaved to because of the sheer amount of debt that you've incurred. But to truly look at it and say, do I enjoy that as an experience? Is this car, because you can look at an XJ220. I don't know what it feels like to drive an XJ220. It could be an amazing ride. It could be rickety. I don't know. So the looks don't necessarily mean everything, but oh my God, the Diablo was a visceral experience. You could just feel everything. There's no nanny controls. There's no nothing. It's you making the decisions. And I still get this like half grin whenever I drive that car. We left Lamborghini Atlanta and parked at a Wendy's like a mile down the street. And I was like, oh my God, this is real. This is real. This is that's my name's on this thing. I somehow am responsible enough to own this. This is a real thing. And we drove all the way back to Michigan, one shot, and then I parked it in my driveway. This is my favorite video of all of my videos. We parked it in my driveway, but we parked it in front of I think I had like a Civic, parked it in front of it, and then called my dad over. He didn't know we had flown out. He knew nothing of this, and he's a very critical person. He shows up, and he's like, "Whose is that? Who's here?" And I'm like, "No, it's mine." And no, he goes, "No, who's here?" I'm like, that's my car. This is a very odd source for a quote, but I once saw Shia LaBeouf say, art is anything that invokes emotion. To see my dad have that state change of like, oh my God, this is different, this is unique. And he was so excited by it that he had so many questions. And his first question was not how much did it cost. He was so excited that he couldn't believe that I'd done it. He didn't know who trusted me enough to let me have the car. It was just overall one of the greatest experiences of my life. And then I crashed it twice. I would say that the first incident would be mostly my fault. As an owner, it was an unfortunate combination of circumstances that showed my inability to maintain the car. So it was late fall, and it was it's like Fast and Furious. It was one more ride. We're going to do one more ride. And so I went out to an event, and the tires were bald because I was going to replace them as soon as I could afford to. So the car was supposed to be parked for the winter, which I'm not used to that in California, but in Michigan, winter's 8 months out of the year. We get up to the event, and on the way back, it starts to rain. I feel the car kick out once, and so I bled off tons of speed. With the weight distribution in the rear, it being predominantly rear heavy, it was the weirdest feeling. Until then, I'd never felt a car that had most of the weight in the rear. And that, I think, contributed, my lack of experience with that contributed to being unable to recover the car. It wasn't until I hit a section of highway that had just been repaved, it was asphalt, but it hadn't been grooved. So it was completely smooth, fresh oil, fresh everything. And I don't blame that, but that is a massive factor in that section. Because as soon as I went from the previous concrete over to the asphalt, instantly, the rear kicked out. And so I will blame the all-wheel drive system because the Diablo has no turning radius. I should say it has all the turning radius. And it's about a mile to turn around that car. So I catch it going one way, and I correct it. And then it I overcompensated just the slightest bit, and then it started to slowly swing to the other side. And I go, and I'm slower purposely to responding to this time. And it goes, and then it's right about there, and then I hit the lock. And so the car just goes past that, so now I'm no longer in control of the direction. And I remember the car continues to go backwards. And that was the weirdest feeling. Continues to go backwards. I'm looking at the traffic behind me now, so I'm turned around fully, all these headlights, and I'm like, really, this is it. This is my moment. And so I had enough top of mind awareness in the moment. I was apologizing to my passenger because, I had put somebody into a situation I would never ever want to do. This is very slow. It's not a very fast. I wasn't going fast because I already was in rain, but the rear was it was in control. And the car wasn't going completely backwards. It was slightly off angle. And so I started sliding to the side of the road. And as soon as I hit a section that had the rumble strip gave me enough traction that it whips the car forward again, almost too much. It whips the car forward again, and then the front passenger tire hits the K-rail. So it spun me enough, plink, and did about $50,000 in damage. It took a couple of years of, I'd say, self-hatred to realize that I was really the at fault emotionally. I hurt my baby. This made me realize the type of human being I am. It didn't matter. What mattered is that I put somebody else into a situation that I truly, that was the only time I've ever done that, where I was like, you know what, I put somebody else into a situation that put their life in danger. And so that was the very first and only thing that mattered to me. At that point, I was actually pretty devastated that, okay, now I've destroyed a car. And I think I had it for another 2 years. It was until I met a forest green Ford Taurus. And so there was, in my hometown, I was on a side road, and this dark green Ford Taurus just changed lanes right into the Diablo. It's as anticlimactic as that. It just happened. I tried to accelerate out of the way, and just tapped me, gave me a love tap in the rear quarter panel. I jumped up on a curb because I was trying to ride as close to the curb as possible, but they knocked me up onto it, and then like a skateboard, I just grinded the whole bottom, the subframe, just up on that angle, and I picked up speed trying to get around them from this happening. And it wasn't so much that curb, but at a corner where there's like a walkway, they carry the curb, and then it dips down to where the walkway part is, and then the very edge, the very corner between the two walkways where it goes to 90, that very corner piece, that's what did the car in. So I went down, I remember feeling that, and all of a sudden, boom, picked up, and it destroyed the subframe. So it wasn't the frame, but it was the subframe. It folded in underneath the transmission. It broke the same control arm again from the damage. So I was like, okay, I know where I'm at now. And then the front bumper and the side skirt, I'm probably nothing else, and that ended up being over $100,000 repair. It was a handful of things. It really, on a normal car like a Civic, that was probably a $2,500 accident. And there's 20 of those in the local AutoZone. You can probably find all the bumpers right there. It would have been a non-issue. And it took 13 months to get the car repaired. Part of that, one of the funniest pieces to that is that it kinked the steering rack. And the shop was like, hey, there are no more steering racks in the world for the Diablo. We have to wait. There's a video of a car in Japan getting a little too spicy as he's getting onto an on-ramp in like a parade of Lamborghinis, and oversteers and then love taps the car. I'm told that was the steering rack I ended up getting. I wasn't donated, I paid for it. I got his steering rack from that car. The interesting thing is that to a random passerby, the person's going to say, oh, that car has been damaged. It's been in multiple situations. It's got quite a story. Is that a rough car? And it's the exact opposite for me. Not only is it mechanically sound, I've tested that multiple times, testing that 202 mile an hour speed limit of the older Diablos. I did it. I bought that entire speedometer. I used the entire speedometer. And that was one of the greatest experiences of my life. So the car is capable. But not only that, it's mine. It is so much a part of my identity. It's a very humbling experience to go, okay, I want a Diablo. I'm a nobody who wants this epic car. The Valentino Balboni era, all that. There's these names. It's an iconic vehicle. To then turn around to be one of the most prolific Diablo owners. If you ask a lot of people who owns a Diablo, there are far more influential people, far more important people than me. But a lot of people can say, oh, Rob owns one. And that is one of the most humbling and just coolest experiences, that the car I look up to, I'm associated to it in some way.
The entire front end of my Ferrari is disintegrated. So everybody says to me, your channel really blew up right about when you crashed your 458, so that was really good for you. And I always laugh because that was the same week I had just started consistently daily vlogging. I know from the analytics that that's what was allowing me to quote unquote blow up. After 6 years of doing YouTube videos and hundreds of thousands of dollars on my own money, and my wife practically almost wanting to kill me every couple of months when I bought new car stuff or wanted to buy a new car or had this big idea. In 2012, for almost an entire year on Facebook, I had the exact car that I had bought on my vision board. So I had bought my dream car, literally my dream car, that day without really even knowing it. So it's an exciting process to get a new car and then want to build it for YouTube marketing purposes. Without almost even really explaining to my wife, I take about $100,000, which was really the investment we had set aside to buy a house, and I sink it into this car, building it. And I didn't want to do the traditional Liberty Walk kit. I wanted to make it look more like a race car. So I go out and I search around and I find out that I can buy actual Ferrari Challenge parts that I could add to this kit to make it look a little more unique. I buy the Ferrari Challenge race wing, which is chassis mounted and costs around $20,000. I end up buying the all carbon wide body GT3 race mirrors, which look really cool, which change the look of the car. And I buy one race seat, the red bright race seat, and the harnesses, which are all astronomical. Like, I see why Ferrari makes a killing off of the race division. The parts are very expensive. At the time, the Red Bull F1 race team had actually wrapped one of their F1 cars in what looked like a manufacturer's prototype camo. And so I kind of steal that idea and I wrap the entire 458 wide body in this crazy black and white, really abstract lines going all over the place. Pattern made no sense. And what that did was it gave the car this presence that no other car at the time I had seen online really had, which was this crazy design with my company's logo branded into the doors and the hood. And to kick everything off, I thought, I'm gonna do a road trip down to Monterey and vlog the entire trip. And then I'm gonna film all of Monterey. And that's gonna kick off the channel of me being an automotive YouTube vlogger. And I go through Yosemite National Park and I go visit some friends in Las Vegas and I stop in Sacramento and I'm meeting some of the people who followed Daily Driven Exotics at the time, which we were really small, like under 50,000 subscribers. And we were doing maybe 1.5 million views in a complete month. And I think this is just the perfect way to start, that revived my channel. We film all the festivities and I'm driving the car around and we get to the very last Sunday of Monterey. And there's this little organized car rally that I've been a part of for a while. And it was my second year driving with them. And on that Sunday, they do a drive in the morning. They get about 50 to 60 supercars together. So a lot of people who follow the channel and were excited about the car and excited about what we were doing with the car came out to drive with us. I have this beautiful new car that I've spent the better part of 6 months planning, $100,000 building and modding, plus the $260,000 investment to get this car, all in the hopes to build up my channel to make the money back so my wife doesn't kill me. And we're going around this long sweeping left-hand turn. And we had kind of separated from the pack because as I come around the turn, there's a red light. And so I stop for the red light and all the cars in front of us go through the light. If you're at the lead of the pack, you are kind of the leader. Everybody behind you isn't really watching the route map or watching on GPS where the route is. They're just kind of enjoying themselves and following whoever's in front of them. So it's like follow the leader. So I'm kind of getting a little nervous because I didn't have the route card map out because I was doing the same thing. I was intending on following people. So I said to my co-pilot, Chad, can you quickly grab the route map and figure out where we're going? So he grabs the route map and he's trying to figure out, light goes green. I start to drive and we're out in the middle of the country and we're driving down this road and a big long sweeping left turn comes up again. And the very first possible turn off of the road we were on is approaching, and it's a right-hand turn. There's no road to the left. So the road goes around this long turn and then there's this one right off to the side. And I kind of try to slow down and we're trying to read if this is the road to turn on. And it's too late. We overshoot the road and Chad goes, that's the road. So I go, oh crap, slam on the brakes, pull off to the side of the shoulder, and I come to a stop. And I see other cars on the rally who had overshot that turn also now starting to come back oncoming, and they're waving their hands out the window, you know, turn down that road. And I'm like, yeah, we got it. A whole bunch of cars behind us have now slowed down or are pulling over. And there's like 30 or 40 cars behind me. So there's this mess of cars. So I said, okay, hang on, we're just gonna turn around here. And I basically do a huge shoulder check, which I can see through the corner. There's kind of cars all over. And I didn't see anyone coming towards us. So I went to pull out onto the road and wham, just like that. The entire front end of my Ferrari is disintegrated. I kid you not, it was so quick. I did a shoulder check and I checked the mirror. A young man who was a huge fan of Daily Driven Exotics, covered in head to toe DD merch, God bless him, hat on, hoodie on, had his mom and his sister with him, brought the family out. He's the one that had the least amount of kind of rally experience in the 10 closest cars to me. And when everyone kind of pulled over as I did, and the other guys I knew with more experience and kind of had that forethought to go, oh, we were supposed to make that turn, everyone's going to pull over and turn around. He just kept ripping, and I guess was thinking this was his opportunity to kind of catch up to the DD car to get close to us. And he just came flying around that corner at a decent amount of speed, and I didn't see him in the time that he had covered that distance, and basically I pulled out right in front of him. Thankfully, he did swerve a little, or else he would have hit me in the door. I might not even be here, to be honest. And he drove right through the front end of the Ferrari. The car that was his like iconic idol car that I had just built, that he just wanted to be near, totally destroyed. My entire investment, dream of building this channel out the window. And I was just, in that moment, really lucky to be alive. Had that car hit me, you know, maybe a foot further down the door, maybe no legs, maybe dead, including my co-pilot, who's a good friend of mine. We'd done a lot of rallies together. Chad goes, are you okay? I'm sitting there frozen, kind of looking out the window, holding the steering wheel. And I said to him, are you okay? And he goes, yeah, I'm okay. He goes, get out the car. It looks like it's smoking. And it was just steam and stuff from all the coolant and stuff up front that had been torn off. But he jumps out of the car. He's like, I don't know if the car's on fire. You know, we're all in shock. I just sat there for a minute and was like, what do I do now? My investment for my home that I talked my wife into letting me put into this business is gone. I just was like so many thoughts. So I get out the car finally and we're on a car rally. There are at least 100 people with cell phones and social media filming this. And my first reaction was to just tell everybody, hey, look, you know, out of the privacy of the event, as well as, you know, my own well-being right now, can we all stop filming this catastrophe and make sure that the other party down the road are at least okay before we film this? And we go down right away and make sure that the other people are okay. Thank God they're okay. No major injuries, small little bump on the head, unfortunately, of the mom who's in the passenger seat. But other than that, we have just 2 wrecked cars. And you can buy new cars, you can't buy new lives. The kid, though, is absolutely distraught. We're trying to calm him down. He's just so upset that he ruined this car. He's like, I don't want to be known as the guy who wrecked the DD tire slayer. And I said, don't worry, man. It's just a car. I'll buy another car. We'll make it even better than the last car. And so we're standing there and the fire department shows up and the police show up and it's just this huge train wreck and the car just gets dragged brutally up the tow truck and everyone's just kind of standing around holding their heads like, I just can't believe this has even happened. And I'm standing there going, I can't believe this has even happened. And that was the end of my Monterey Car Week. But my insurance company only covered me up to $5,000 for aftermarket parts. However, I learned a really valuable lesson in building cars that if the manufacturer had a part number for that car, that was considered a part that was covered. So if we go back to the beginning of the story of when I built the car, I bought Ferrari Challenge wing worth 20 grand. I bought Ferrari carbon fiber GT3 mirrors, Ferrari front racing seat harnesses, and they covered all that stuff. I thought, my wife was going to be super upset, and she was really supportive. She was like, I'm really glad you're okay. Everything's going to work out as it always does. We just got to stay positive about it. And she really brought me back up. And from that point forward, I started to look for my next car. And that's when it was funny. People to this day say to me a lot of the time, Damon, your channel has really taken off. It's really blown up. Even though I've been at this for 6 years. The same week that happened that's when I started to kind of almost daily vlog. And it's the consistency that I know now of putting content up consistently every day, or even the consistency of what the content is. That's what really grew the channel. And so that's my one piece of advice to anybody looking to build social media is don't go out and crash a 458. That is not how you build a channel. That is not how you build your social media. It's the consistency of the content. And as you put out more and more people come on, and more people share, it's the snowball effect. It's like anything.
I don't want to tell them what I'm doing in case I blow it up. I want it to still be under warranty. To set the stage for the Cannonball in '79, you have to go back to '71 when Brock and Dan Gurney ran in the Daytona. And there was an article in Sports Illustrated about it. So I'm over at my neighbor's house with one of my friends. And, he got Sports Illustrated. I wasn't that into sports. So, he goes, hey, you got to see this. Because the two of us were always talking about how cool Baja was and the fact that these guys were doing it. And maybe one day we could, do something like that. And I had got my license and I was like, yeah, we could always plan for this. But we're still in high school. What do we know? We're both looking at the article and reading it. And it gets to the point where, Dan has this famous quote, at no point did we ever exceed 175 miles an hour. And it had a great picture of them, with the speedometer, and he's holding on with 2 fingers. And he's like 170 plus. And it's going like, this is so cool. I hadn't even really been keeping up with Car and Driver at that time or anything, so I didn't really know about it the first I'd heard. This is something I would kill to do. I have got to try to do this if the opportunity ever comes up. Finally, in '78, I started thinking, well, maybe they'll run it soon. And I saw, I loved Lotus's Old Time Avengers, the TV series thing. And I saw that there was an Esprit for sale in northern Jersey. And I think it was like $17,000, which was a boatload of money. And I talked to my brother who happened to be up from the Army. And he was looking for a new car. He had a 260Z. And we decided we would see if we can get it. So I sold my cars, he sold his car. He took out I think the maximum finance he could get on it was maybe $10,000. I took out a personal loan for $4,000. And together we pooled our money with the understanding that if they had the Cannonball, I would get to run the car. But meanwhile, it was his car to use down in Georgia. So it was, it was a cool thing. And then I had subscribed to Brock's newsletter. Suddenly he wrote down, let's do it. And I was like, what? And I remember I was down in Savannah when I, first read it. And I said, Bill, they're doing it. I got to apply, can I use the car? And he goes, yeah. I sent one, sent a thing in a letter, and he sent me the application. I filled it out, and it was pretty simple. But he wanted to know any racing experience, which I had 2 years Formula Ford racing at that time between California and Canada. In the Jim Russell School, I had my Canadian national license. And the guy who was going to be my partner was Dick Dodge Jr., who had just won the Pikes Peak Hill Climb that year. He had just beaten Bobby Unser's 11-year-old record by like 3/4 of a second. So I sent in the application, and it comes back and it says, congratulations, you've been accepted, and expect to travel on these dates. We want to keep it as quiet as possible, so don't, tell anybody about it if you can. Can't expect to transport a tux unwrinkled across country, so don't worry about that. And just generally, be aware of, Ohio. 2 weeks later, they gave us the date and the time to be there at the Lock, Stock, and Barrel. I was going like, well, okay, that's not the Red Ball, but all right, why not? I go down about 2 or 3 days before the start of the Cannonball, which is not a lot of time, with my friend. And we fly down to Savannah, pick up the car, and drive it back. Tested it out on the way, and like my friend took it up for 100, and it's like the first time he'd ever gone that fast. And I'm like, yeah, go, man, go. And he was like so impressed. So then we get back home, and I look, and it's like, these tires in the rear are looking kind of half slick on the inside. And apparently, my brother, who doesn't have much mechanical sympathy, never bothered to notice. And it's the first time we'd ever heard of a four-wheel alignment on a car. Well, apparently the dealer never did it either when we picked it up. All right, I want to get it checked out at the dealership in Jersey. And I don't want to tell them what I'm doing in case I blow it up. I want it to still be under warranty. I'm going in and I'm being kind of cagey, and it's like Saturday morning, and the event starts Saturday night. I can't do this in these tires. I said, we're going to LA. And he goes, well, if you take it easy, these will make it. It'll be fine. I'm going like, no, I mean, I'm not so sure they're going to make it. And he had 6 other Esprits sitting there. And going, could you just like take the tires off of this one and the rim and just swap them, and I'll pay you for them, anything. And he goes, no. So I show up, and, there's no way I was going to find any tires at that late stage. So I'm like, all right. And then, guys in the parking lot start noticing. And I was worried about, Brock was going to say something or whatever, but he didn't. Brock had basically done a Noah's Ark list on the Cannonball. He had 2 Lotus Esprits, 2 308 Ferraris, 2 Porsche Turbos, 2, boom, 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 as much as he could do. One of the things that really surprised us when we got to the shopping center, because we were all pulled around the back to keep it hidden, was there was a ton of cars. And I didn't know how many until a couple hours later, but there were like 45 cars registered. I'm like, man, that's a bunch. Because before, I think the most they'd ever had was maybe a dozen. And it become this huge underground cult thing, and everybody was just in there. And I remember the driver's meeting, just looking around, and Brock was standing on top of the dumpster with George Lyle, who owned the Lock, Stock, and Barrel, addressing the crowd. And there's like a sea of humanity. I'm going like, are all these people involved in this? This is amazing. And most of them were. I think everybody did it just because of the opportunity. Whether or not it continued, again, nobody even thought about it. It was just kind of like, let's do it while we can. We had our starting orders, and I think I was like the 10th one to take off. So I was pretty early in the pack. And it was drizzling slightly. We get off, and I missed Dennis Mendocini's takeoff in the truck up the hill, which I do remember him down there looking things over and wondering what he was up to. Going along, and it's Saturday night traffic on 95, going from Connecticut through New York City to the George Washington Bridge. And surprisingly, it wasn't too bad. I caught up to the Ferrari 308 in front of us, and he took off to go across the Tappan Zee to avoid the city traffic. And we make it into the George Washington Bridge, and I look at my partner, and I said, if you want to bail, now is the time to do it. He goes, no, let's do this. We're going through Pennsylvania. In the long climb up the hill, it was foggy from Stroudsburg to Pocono. And the car was kind of like struggling a little. I'm going like, okay, keep an eye on the gauges. I don't want to blow it up so quick. And so we finally plateau, and the car starts running really good. And now it's about 11 something at night. And we're out near Du Bois, PA, which is about 310 miles into Pennsylvania. And I'm going like, well, I still got gas. It'll be fine. The gas gauge is reading okay. And I get about a mile past the exit, and it starts going, and I'm going like, oh no. I'm out of gas. Back in the old days, you didn't have cell phones. You didn't have anybody to come bail you out. You had to get out and walk. And I made it back to this gas station about a mile behind, and the guy was getting ready to close up, the kid. I said, look, I need just a small can. He said, I'll give you $20 deposit for the can. Just give me a gallon of gasoline, and I'll come right back, and I'll give you your can, and I can fill up. And he goes like, all right. And somebody gave me a ride back up to the car. Dumped the gas in the car, find a place to turn around, come back down, and now it's like midnight, and we fill the car up and take off again. So it's like, well, we lost about 45 minutes doing that. We get further into Pennsylvania, and Again, this was the 80s. This is the same weekend as 3 Mile Island was melting down. So nobody, in the right minds, and me included, was going to go near Harrisburg. Running across an 80 was just torn up really bad. And there was this one bridge. You come down a hill and you make a right-hand turn at the base of the hill, and there's this really long bridge. You know it's really high because it's so long. Before you hit the bridge, the cement had sagged a little. So we're coming down at about 100, 110, and my partner's driving at this point, and we hit it, and the front end lifts up and stays up. And I'm going like, keep it straight, keep it straight. And I'm like leaning forward, doing whatever I can to try to get the car to settle down. And he just held it steady, and it came down. It was like straight as hell. It's like, thank God. So we dodged that bullet. Get to Ohio. There's a car off to the side, right on the border, like a Chrysler. And on the CB, he starts coming, yeah, Blue Lotus. And the third time I finally answered, I'm going like, yeah. He goes, are you number 3? I said, number 3 in what? He goes, Cannonball. I'm going, like, what's that? It's like, okay, we know we're the third one through here. And the guy in the Ferrari who had taken off ahead of us, and this is with my 45 minutes of downtime, we get into Akron, and he's right in front of us again. Later on, I was talking to him in LA, and I says, what the hell happened? He goes, he got stopped 3 times in the span of 5 miles in Akron. The last time they hit him for 56 miles an hour. And as he's rolling the window down, the cop says, you in a hurry, Mark? So it was like, okay, they knew we were coming, and it was Ohio. Another interesting phenomenon is my entire life of driving, which is, racing, Cannonball, 4-1 laps of America, everything. I have never gotten a speeding ticket. And I'm just like super paranoid. So, and now I'm driving an old piece of crap Toyota, so it doesn't go that fast anyway. And it's invisible because it's a Corolla. So it worked fine. And we were like cruising through Indianapolis. We were making good time. We were about 100 miles east of St. Louis in this little town called Effingham. And we'd gone about close to 1,100 miles at that point in 11 and a half hours or so, maybe 12 hours. And it's like, yeah, okay, we're still doing good. And we hit a puddle as we're going around a turn with these interstate splits, and the car just snapped. And I had just fallen asleep for the first time in like 40 hours. And I wake up and I see the guardrail coming at me sideways. And I'm like, oh, shit. So I lean forward and I put my hand on my head, and it smacks the side window on the impact, and it spun around, and he caught it as it bounced off and straightened it out. And he goes, we lost a tire. And I'm like, all right, well, we pulled over, and I looked under the car, just opened the door and put my head down. It's like, no, they're all up. So he fires it up, and we get about a half mile down the road, and the thing cuts out again. And it wouldn't start up, and we're going like, oh, crap, I really screwed something up. What's going on? And the steering rack was bent out because he had the wheel. And my partner was a last-minute replacement for the original guy, and this guy was like 6'4", which in a Lotus Esprit is not a good combination. And when the car lost it, he went to catch it, and his hand hit his leg. So he couldn't get full lock on it. And it hit, and then he opened his legs up and was able to catch it on the rebound. It was too late at that point. And then it was his turn to go get a tow truck because I did the first one. And it was raining, and it was miserable, and about an hour later, Wrecker shows up. Meanwhile, Brock goes by in the ambulance, and you could smell something wasn't quite right there. The guy takes us back, and we're in this little town with nothing to do. It's a Sunday, and we waited 5 hours in the bus stop for a ride to St. Louis. We got into St. Louis. I said, I'm checking into a nice hotel. We got into the Marriott. I made reservations to go fly out to LA because my brother was flying out with his friend to pick the car up to take it back after the race. And my other partner's like, no, I'm going back to Boston. So it's like, all right, fine. So I went, that was the end of the Cannonball for me, and I went out to LA and proceeded to have a great week with the guys. It was insane, and a lot of it came down to luck of the draw, the time you left, the time you got there, because when you got 45 cars running, the guys at the back, the cops are wise. Yeah, so they're going to get most of the heat. When in their front, it's easier to slide under it. So apparently, like I said, we were the third one into Ohio on Interstate 80 at the time, even with our screw up. So yeah, again, it's all just a bunch of luck, but it was fun. And that's what it was all about, a sense of adventure, fun, maybe a little rebelliousness.
Oh, fuck!
We started a club in Ontario called ODOC. It was originally called the Ontario DeLorean Owners Club, was ODOC. ODOC's very first meeting was me and 2 other guys that owned a DeLorean in Ontario. We met at the Krispy Kreme Donuts. It was fun. It was good. It then kind of parlayed into this thing where there's like 63 owners in Ontario now, just over 120 something across Canada. And we started doing these local events. We were going to this thing called the Shecky Queue. It was Mike McPartland. His nickname is Shecky. He's from Ireland. He originally came over from Ireland to buy DeLoreans to bring them back to Ireland. And he had a nice sizable piece of property in Brampton, Ontario. We would all go to his house every year for a big barbecue, park our DeLoreans all over his lawn, take a bunch of pictures. It's a great time. I was driving to that event in my stock DeLorean, and somebody was taking a picture of my car, and they hit me from behind so hard that it hit me to the car in front of me, that car to the car in front of it, and that car to the car in front of it. I got out of the car, stood up, fine, no broken arms, no broken legs, no blood, no nothing. Then I looked at my car and I just felt my heart break. And I was just like, oh my God, this is awful. The whole front was smushed. The impossible to find driver's front fender destroyed. Windshield was cracked. The back end of the car, the whole rear quarter panel was smushed in. The louvers were cracked. The fiberglass was splitting up into the air. It was just heartbreaking. Towed the car home. Didn't make it to the Shecky Queue that year. We were in the midst of moving from one house to another house, and the insurance company was kind of having a hard time figuring out what to do with this car now. I said, well, hey, I know a lot about the DeLorean community. I can help you get some prices, appraisals, fair values. It was with Haggerty, so it was like an agreed buyback thing that they had with me, first right of refusal. And they said, yeah, in order for you to buy this car back, we need at least 3 quotes to know what the value of this car is. Then we'll let you buy the car back at what we think is reasonable. The timeline of moving is creeping up. And I'm like, I really don't want to move a crashed car from one house to the next house. I'm asking the insurance company, what are we doing here? They're like, we don't know. We're still trying to figure out the value and how we're going to do this and what the payout should be. And the lady's like, let me just be honest with you. Just give me a number. If it's reasonable, we'll do it. I gave her a number. She agreed like that. And I instantly said, shit, I should have went lower. But I was able to buy the car back, and then my friend Gary was able to restore the car back to its former glory. When I say former glory, I think this car didn't look better except for maybe the day that it rolled across the factory floor. Gary did a fantastic job with all the fiberglass, all of the stainless steel work. We had another guy in Ontario who was like a big fiberglass shop that really beefed up a lot of the fiberglass on it. So, I mean, this car is solid now. It's got the whole soundproofing interior. It's, I want to say, almost better than across the factory floor, because I get in that car and it runs like a top. It's nice and quiet. I'm super happy to have that car back on the road. So that was crash number 1. And that was heartbreaking, but fully redeemed when me and Gary took it around the block again, and the car was better than ever. I even got a gas flap hood out of that one. That's a rare thing to get with a DeLorean these days. It originally had a grooved hood, and I was able to upgrade it a little bit and get a gas flap hood, which is super special for me. The second crash was the time machine. So this is the time machine that I got from the radio contest, turned it into the time machine, take it around, do local events, local Comic-Cons and stuff like this. And we were organizing a 80s and 90s car show in Ontario called Oblivion. And this lady that was helping us organize Oblivion, Tori, had never been in a DeLorean before. I was getting ready to move again, but this time instead of moving from Burlington to another house in Burlington, I was doing a big move. I was moving from Burlington to Miami. And Tori's like, hey, am I ever going to get a ride in this DeLorean? I was like, yes, today's the day. We're going to take you for a ride in the DeLorean time machine. So I was at my brother's house. I backed out of his garage and I backed my DeLorean time machine into the wall and dented my rear quarter panel. Again, super hard to see in the time machine. Didn't have a proper backup camera on this car back then. Now I do. Very important to get one of those. I had the car at my friend Justin's shop, Wells Auto. That's all he does is DeLorean repairs in Ontario. Justin had fixed that quarter panel, brought it back to life. Looks like there's nothing ever wrong with it. And I had Tori meet me at Justin's place so that I could take her for a ride in the time machine. We went to Taco Bell, had lunch, beautiful lunch. Then we went for a nice drive in the countryside with the time machine. There's a really cool road in Burlington called Rattlesnake Point. It's a big hill, nice windy road, and I figure it's a great country, safe place to drive Tori in the time machine. Well, I was wrong. It started raining. We were going down the hill as it started raining. Back end of the car gives out on me. Next thing I know, I'm heading almost off the escarpment. It's the Niagara Escarpment in Ontario, and it was a pretty big drop. If I'm falling off this ledge in a time machine, we would have been dead. Luckily, a tree stopped us from going over the edge of the escarpment, and the car, when it went to go up, kind of tilted on its side like this and ended up perched in this precarious position, just kind of teetering on the ledge of the escarpment. And Tori is in the passenger seat, and I'm kind of looking down on her, and she's freaking out, hyperventilating. I'm like, I'm sorry, that's not a very good first ride in a DeLorean, but it's pretty memorable, right? Then she passed out. So I was freaking out. I'm like looking around, I'm like, I'm not bleeding, she's not bleeding, we're okay. But like an instant, the police, paramedics, fire trucks, everybody showed up, and I got this fireman pounding on the door saying, hey, is she okay? And I go, I think so. Like, I mean, she was just talking to me a minute ago, and then she woke up and she's like, I'm fine. But then she started freaking out again and yelling, and they're like, sir, this lady's in distress. We need to get her out of your car right now. And I said, okay, this thing has an inertia switch. We got to push down on the door. You'll be able to open the door and we can get out. He's like, no, we don't have time for that. And before I could even say anything, the jaws of life came out, and this guy was cutting through the stainless steel on my car. And I was just hand in my head like this, just looking at Tori, looking at my door. I didn't know if I should cry or pass out myself. Part of me thinks the fireman kind of did it so he can be like, hey man, I used the jaws of life on a DeLorean, right? Long story short, they got us out of the car. Everybody was safe. Tori was fine. She hurt her arm a little bit from banging it when we rolled over on the side there, but that was the second crash. And that crash, the time machine went through insurance this time. It was a different insurance company. It wasn't Haggerty anymore. It was a company called Zare. And Zare Insurance moved pretty quickly. They had the car at Justin's shop, which was literally, ironically, it was just there getting the dent repaired. Now it was on a tow truck back to Wells Auto to get the time machine assessed. It took about a year and a bit just to get all of the parts sourced. We had to get a new door. We had to get new quarter panels. We had to get some fiberglass work. But that car is now back together, better than ever, and in Miami, living its second life as a time machine again. I don't want to become known as the DeLorean crash guy. I mean, I've crashed a stock car, I've crashed a time machine, and now we've got the original crash test DeLorean. Having walked away from both of those accidents that I was personally in, not a scratch on me, not a drop of blood, not a broken bone, not nothing, I would say the DeLoreans are super safe cars. And if I had to get in an accident in them again, I wouldn't say I'd gladly do it, but I'd feel safe.
But what I remember was when I lost control is just hearing the engine behind my nose revving up high. I went that morning to just pick up some breakfast while my girlfriend stayed at the hotel. She was still sleeping. I get to a traffic light right before my hotel, and I see a brand new red Huracan Spider with black wheels, just gorgeous. Pulls up next to me at the traffic light, and I'm admiring that car. I've driven the Gallardo, I've driven Murcielago, and I usually, every time that I go out of Atlanta, if I get a chance to rent an exotic, I try to take a chance and do it just to enjoy it. I looked up the company's name that was on the license plate. I noticed that exotic rental place that I looked at my phone was about 0.3 miles from my hotel. On the way back to the hotel, I was like, well, I just want to drive in front of the place and see. We have another 18 hours in Vegas. I don't even have time to rent one. So I told him, I was like, hey, but I'm not going to be here for 24 hours. He's like, well, what if I give you a deal? What if I bring me the car back tomorrow, 2 hours before you have to go to the airport, and I'll do it for the 4-hour price. He shows up in a yellow Huracan coupe. Yellow's not my favorite color for a Lamborghini, although it's a beautiful color on Lamborghinis, but it's just not my personal preference. Walked in, he's like, hey, what if I give you another $200 off of this one? Let's do it. I drove with my girlfriend out that night. I stayed out till 1 o'clock in the morning. One of the ironic things is the whole time when I was driving with my girlfriend, I was driving more cautious, just enjoying the car. And twice, and I told her, I was like, the only way somebody can kill themselves in a car like this, I was like, if somebody gives a little too much, that's when those cars will go crazy. But this one's an all-wheel drive, so it would usually help to interfere and correct any driver errors. And the Lamborghini Huracan, 2015, 2016, to my knowledge, most of them were LP 610 4 all-wheel drive. The car that I ended up renting was a 2017 LP 580 which is a rear-wheel drive. We went back to our hotel. The next day, I get up at 8:30. I was staying at the Aria Hotel, which has a Starbucks in the bottom of it. But I was like, I want to go get Starbucks. I'm going to go get it from the farthest Starbucks I can find on my iPhone map. Let me go. 30 minutes back, I'll be fine. I pulled out of the hotel. Rookie mistake number one, the temperature. It was about high 30s, low 40s that night. The tires are cold, tend to be more slippery, just basic stuff. I pulled out of the Aria, made a left on Las Vegas Boulevard, got past Bellagio, and the next traffic light at Caesars, I look up at the traffic light across from me, and there's another yellow Huracan with black wheels. I took a picture on my phone. Then I look up next to me, there was a blue Toyota Prius, and there was a kid in the back. And the driver's side window, and he looked like he was about 4 or 5 years old. And he was just, excited. I was like, wow, that's like me 20 years ago. That's me 22 years ago. Traffic light turns green. I'm taking off. Yes, I'm picking up speed fairly quick. I've hit a road imperfection, and I'm using this term because legally I can't say a pothole, legally I can't say a bump, because when I said I hit a bump or a pothole initially, they're like, oh no, well, Las Vegas police checked, there was no potholes, bumps. I was like, well, if there was an imperfection, and that is a legal term, if any kind of unevenness or in the road, I felt that imperfection because once I hit it, I didn't see it, I felt it, and my foot was in the gas pedal. It just jerked a little more. That's all that it took. In a rear-wheel drive Huracan, it turned out to be not the wisest thing to attempt to do, whether intentionally or not. It was wrong in every way. Gave a little too much power to the rear wheels. The tires broke loose. Speed limit was 30. I think I was in the 40s. But what I remember was when I lost control is just hearing the engine behind my nose revving up high. And I knew I was in trouble. I look ahead, and once the car slid, it all just happened so quick. But when the car slid, I remember seeing a palm tree, and I just pulled my arm up where I'm protecting my forehead. But at the same time, I want to peek. I'm peeking, like, to see where am I going? What's going on? Perfectly came where the driver door is on a palm tree. Spun one more time, and it kind of fell on the other side of Las Vegas Boulevard. Not that I could see much after the airbag kind of punched me. The gentleman is trying to open the door, but the door handles on a Huracan are shaved. You have to pop it kind of from the front of the door handle so it can get out. And I can see him scrambling. He didn't know what to do. So I reached in and I opened the door from the inside. And I tried to pull myself up, and I couldn't. Half of my body was numb. I've never experienced anything like this where it's just not responding. He came to pull me out, and then there was another gentleman who's probably in his mid-30s, military background, definitely. When he pulled me out, pulls up my ID, which my name has Lebanese background. I knew he served in the military because he started speaking to me in Arabic. And I'm like, I'm okay. I'm okay. He can speak in English, I'm fine. I can't tell you what day it is in Arabic. I don't know how to say it, but I can tell you what day it is in English. Keep in mind, this whole time I'm laying on the ground. The ambulance showed up, they put me in the stretcher, and when they had me standing for a second, there was a crowd of 200-300 people at least, and everybody was cheering. I did feel guilty at that point, because I did put everybody's life at jeopardy, all those people, by something stupid that I did, regardless of how much control I had over it. It was my action. I was the sole responsible person for what happened that day. And I got to the hospital. They had a team of 3-4 doctors who was trauma unit. I was in the hospital total about 8 hours. I actually left the hospital about 2 hours after my flight was supposed to take off that day. So we stayed another 3-4 days in Vegas, unexpected higher rate for hotels, and everything just kind of stopped multiplying. I was in a wheelchair for 3 days, fractured 4 vertebrates in my lower spine. The one thing that I wish was I did a little more homework about the exact car that I'm driving, just so I can take that into consideration when I'm driving, of how the car would behave, how the car would react. The other thing I was surprised was I did have this rental under my personal insurance, which they weren't very happy about. And that was the one time that I didn't get the rental cars company insurance, and I wished I did. My deductible wasn't much, it was only $500, so I wasn't out too much there, but it does not always cover your medical bills. If you were at fault, your insurance policy might not cover your medical bills. I have about $12,000 of medical bills right now that I'm trying to negotiate and talk down. I've tried to get a couple of lawyers initially, but lawyers wouldn't, because it was multi-state, because it was a rental with my policy, and because I didn't call the lawyers for 2 or 3 days later, a lot of them didn't want anything to do with it, because they felt like they wouldn't collect enough money off medical damages and off suing for other stuff. And I'm with a reputable company. I'm with Esurance, which is backed by Allstate. And it's crazy because with Esurance, you build your own policy online. And I could have swore I did not, because I've done adjustments to it. I could have swore not once. And then they referred to an email that they sent me back, which my policy has been with them for 1.5 years, that they sent me back, I had to find. They sent me an email after I signed up with them. It's me not opting in for medical coverage. It just all sounded like a scam that I was set up for. The other thing that the insurance company tried to do was, when I mentioned earlier there was 2 Lamborghinis at the traffic light, apparently there was reports of somebody racing a yellow Lamborghini up and down the Las Vegas Boulevard that morning. I kept telling them, I was like, I left the hotel at 8:45. I walked out of my hotel room. The accident happened at 9:17 according to the ticket. I did not have time to be up in Las Vegas Boulevard once. Now, they're like, well, how can you prove? I was like, well, you guys have, you're going to talk to Las Vegas PD, they're doing their investigation. You can track down the video cameras down the street. Oh, well, we might not be able to go that far. What can you provide? I was talking to the rental company's owner, and he shared with me a voicemail from the insurance company that they're basically trying to make him go after me because I was racing somebody else. Although insurance is supposed to cover me, but because in the legal binding agreement, it said that I shouldn't be using for a car for racing, so it's a breach of contract. Insurance trying to get a way to get out of it. Luckily, the guy was very understanding. He's dealt with insurance companies before. And I told the lady on the phone, I was like, well, there was another yellow Lamborghini at the same traffic light that I crashed at before I crashed. Oh, yeah? Well, how about you send us a picture of it? Okay, send me an email. I'll send you a picture of it. I get a voicemail from her when I get up. Hey, Mr. Khatib, we've talked to Vic at Dream Exotics Las Vegas, and we've agreed to settle for the amount of $205,000 and change, but your medical bills are still not covered.
It's a bulging supercar in a small town. There was a friend of mine who left our small town and went all the way to California, became a videographer for Discovery and whatnot. And he would be the crazy guy shooting like World's Deadliest Catch. And anyway, he goes, Casey, man, we got to do a sizzle about you or something. Like, who knows, you're crazy enough, we got to do a show. I'm like, all right, let's take the race car. And at the time I had a chassis built by Bob McKee for the early USRR series, which was the predecessor to Can-Am. And in about 1970-71, it was bodied with a Lola T70 Mark IIIB body. So basically, you know, a European endurance race or something you'd see in the movie Le Mans, that sort of thing. It was basically my entire net worth in my late 20s, right? So I told him, let's take it. I'll find a track day. We would go to Nelson Ledges, this tiny little track up in Akron, Ohio, and just to do some video. And of course, I'm the only goofball showing up in a Can-Am car, basically. Period correct looking clothing, open face helmet, goggles and everything. And I see this blue with white stripes 97 Viper GTS sitting there with a wing on. I'm like, I gotta check this out. It was just cool. I mean, anything built by Bob Lutz, testosterone machine, is probably something I'm gonna wanna drive. And I said to the man who had it, was going to the track day, I said, sir, I'm interested in buying one of these cars. Do you mind if I just look inside your car? And he goes, sure, actually, hell, you got a fast car. You can drive it if you want. I'm like, really, on the track? Okay, next session? Yeah, all right. And my dad was with me, and as many dads are, he's like, are you crazy? I'm like, Dad, I'm here in a cool car. I can afford to buy it. Why not? You know, let's test drive it.
And I had no idea how to work the head unit, the radio. It was one of those that flip up, and the reason that matters is we're pulling out of the pits to go on the track in this car I've never been in that's fast with my dad, who's being a dad. It was blasting like speed metal, like the whole time. It was like Power Man 5000 or something like this, like full stereo. Your hair's tingling, it's so loud. My dad's like, turn that crap off. And I'm like, I know, man. And I pushed buttons and the head unit just folds up. And I'm like, I don't know how to use this, Dad. We got to just go. He's like, but this is crap. And I'm like, just go with it, man. And I just fell in love immediately. That big blue bulging hood and those beautiful mirrors. And it made my dad bothered, so it was probably pretty cool. And I talked to the man. He goes, actually, I was thinking about maybe selling it. So later I called him on the phone. We arranged the deal. It was a very nice price. I'm like, I got to get there and buy this quick before he changes his mind. And I lived in a small town, and this man lived about 2.5 hours away, and I had to find a buddy who could drive the car home. Nobody was available. And so I called this girl who was interested. I'm like, you want to go with me out of town to buy a car? I need somebody to drive it back. We'll have a fun, make a day thing out of it. And as oftentimes you're surprised by people who own supercars, it's very interesting to see where they live. And she's like, oh, it's just down here, the driveway. And we're on this driveway, and on this driveway, and on this driveway, and it goes and goes and goes past horses and manicures, very beautiful. And you get to a very beautiful house with a turnaround, American flag out, and I remember as a sunset, and there's the Viper just sitting there looking glorious. But the thing that was so interesting about this Viper is, as a 20-something single guy, I realized this car over a lot of other exotic cars seems to have an effect on this single woman. I really like this and I'm going to go with this. And soon after, the car earned the nickname Goose because I said it was the best wingman ever and it had absolutely nothing to do with flying. And at the time, I lived in a very small Midwestern town, 18,000 people. There's some industrial, a lot of farming, that sort of thing. And our family business was a small golf course out of town. And every day I'd drive to the golf course. And the course being out in the middle of the country, you know there's not a lot of patrolmen out there, and being a race driver, I would use my car and really enjoy it. I would drive out to the golf course every day, have a great time. There's a hot rod shop out there. I knew I could blaze by there in like fourth gear, and then there used to be a railroad track, so I slow down. You just crest the hill without catching air. And there's a stop sign, this beautiful road between fields. There's nobody around, and you could accelerate full throttle, like first, second, third gear, right into fourth, and you'd be flat out, and you could just get to that corner without lifting. And of course, you're on and sailing by. And then eventually a little bit, you start seeing a few residential houses, so you bring it back down to a reasonable speed. And then there was this left-hand turn, which is kind of a third gear sweeper. So, you know, boom, boom, third gear, flat out, back down this hill, back up to fourth, fifth, down to first, and then blast it back up to the golf course. You know, I grew up driving like that, and that's probably how it helped become a race car driver. But there's a problem with this that I didn't realize as a 20-something-year-old kid. It's not going to take long before everybody knows who you are and everybody knows your driving habits. And it didn't help matters that on that third gear corner, there was a very crusty old man that lived there. And that on the other street where I would slow down just a little bit for the crest of the hill, my ex-girlfriend mother, who hated my guts, I don't know why because I was very nice to her, what happened was the hot rod guys started seeing sheriffs sitting on the road. And they're like, you guys never patrol out here. Is there something we should know about? Well, probably my ex-girlfriend's mother made such a fuss about it that it became a thing in a small town where it basically was the Dukes of Hazzard, and it became a Roscoe P. Coltrane's got a bet with the city cops to who can nail the flashy race car Viper first. And it hit me within about 3 hours, yeah, I'm done. I'm done with this town. I can't be me here anymore. I'm not going to be able to work on race cars and flashy cars if this is the way it is. Because this isn't like the 70s and 80s. I can't go sliding a Dodge Charger sideways and have fun with the good old boys. I made a deal to move out of town to work with this guy with his race shop and do some fun stuff. And a week later, it was a very short time, I ended up moving out of town and starting things that way. When I moved out of town to Columbus, Ohio, it had a really good exotic car scene. The Cars and Coffee there. I loved the environment. I loved being around the people. The horizon was much bigger and better. But at the same time, too, I was young and cocky, and which probably didn't work in my favor, but made things a lot of fun sometimes. We would go on all these great exotic car drives through the countryside and power into numbers, you know, you're fast, and it was fun. And I remember this time we got lost in the middle of the country, totally turned around. Now there's all these supercars, it looked like Austin Powers trying to turn around, and they're going up this gravel hill. And another friend of mine, Joe, in a Porsche comes there to turn around. And I kind of had this little thing, which was very immature of me at the time. I was in my 20s, give me a break. with this guy who, he was pretty cool. He was a CEO. He really got into Ferraris and Lamborghinis. But to me and my kind of friends that built stuff, he was sort of like the rich kid of the group in high school that's not really that cool and not that good at riding BMX bikes, but he hangs out anybody, but you kind of want to mess with him, you know? And I remember he was behind me in some Ferrari, and I'm like, all right, let's see if you can do this. So I'm like, okay, flip into kart racing mode. And I hadn't done this in the Viper, but my brain just told me I could. We need to turn around and go this way, and I've got a short area. So I'm like, I'm just gonna light them up, light up the tires, get the coefficient, twitch it this way, that way, and spin it around and go back, no problem. Well, it actually worked, and it was a beautiful thing. It did it exactly how it worked in my mind, which that's not always how life works, but in this case it did, and I was thankful. And I remember accelerating by him in the Ferrari, and just for a moment I was like, wah, like this. And that was me in my 20s. But the Viper is a fantastic car. It was reliable. I just enjoyed putting miles and miles and miles on it because it never broke. And I never felt bad about parking in a parking lot because it had a fiberglass body and you wouldn't get door dings. And I remember in 2013, it was December, there was no snow on the ground, there was no ice, and I took the Viper out to go meet with some friends. And I was driving back to my condo on Sawmill Drive, and it was a typical, 2 lanes each way and a median, 45, 50 mile an hour. And I was just driving home, wasn't even doing anything interesting or going fast, and I see a car come blazing out from the other side across traffic, and I'm thinking, okay, they probably see me coming and they just want to go southbound like me. I'm just going to move over a lane, let them have that lane. No. And this is all happening within quarters of a second. And so I just move over in the lane, maintain the speed, and I see the car coming, I'm like, they're not stopping. I was mad because now I'm on the brakes as hard as I can. It is a Viper with ABS. It's December. Pirellis are not going to grab. And then the moment goes, I'm going to hit that car. And there's nothing I can do. And I'm like, I'm mad. And then I see that big, beautiful Viper hood I fell in love with on the racetrack go, whoa, like this. And it hit hard enough that it felt weightless, but I didn't know if I was just like instantaneous adrenaline mad. And just pummeled the car and then slid and then hit the curb. And I'm sitting there, I'm fine. The airbags never went off because I put in a Nardi wheelie, so those were gone. And I had the presence of mind from working on cars for all those years. Okay, the car got wrecked in the front. Turn off the motor so nothing bad happens to the engine so you can fix it in the future. And I turn off the car and I'm so mad. And I get out, and this is a very busy street, 5 lanes, but I didn't care. I'm black leather jacket, sunglasses on, I just straight Terminator marched across the road because I hit this car so hard. It stopped all the forward momentum. It spun around like once or twice in oncoming traffic where other cars hit it. This is my car. I worked to get this. I'm a kid from the cornfields working on this, and you just wrecked it. And it's a Viper, so everybody's gonna think I screwed up. You know what I mean? Come on. So I remember walking up and this door opens, and for a moment, I didn't feel bad, but I'm not gonna pick a fight because it was this not very athletic looking young woman in a not very athletic looking car. But I was so mad, it just took over, and all that came out of my mouth was stupid. And so I turned around, and I come on, I'm a little embarrassed, but the car just got wrecked. Give me a break. Everybody was fine. Nobody got hurt at all. But the car she ended up clipping over there was driven by a young woman who's probably 16 years old that had her baby in the back seat and another woman over there. And I'm like, oh my God, could this be any more ridiculous? And everybody's going to think I'm basically Satan because clearly it's my fault, even though I was doing the speed limit and obeying all the laws and I have 0 points on my license. And I'm standing over there, and now the guy who lives a few doors down from me sees this. He's driving his Nissan GTR, so he's going to come to Car Guy Rescue. And now suddenly other exotic cars are coming by to see what's going on. And these people involved with the wreck, and they all think I'm the devil because basically it's an exotic car and now there's a wreck. So a police officer does everything, comes up to me and says, sir, she was in a left-hand turn lane only. Everything she did was illegal. Even if you were doing 200 miles an hour, it's still her fault. You're fine. And I said, well, thank you, but I actually wasn't this time. The car was pretty smashed up. I mean, it's a Viper, there's other fish in the sea, let insurance take it. I did well enough, had a good policy, and they went to bat for me on the other people, so everything was fine. And I got a call from a guy that had bought my wrecked Viper, and he was fixing it up because I had a sticker on it. He tracked me down. And he goes, I wondered if you maybe had any parts for it. And I'm like, actually, I do. And so he bought some parts off of me, and he fixed it up, and I didn't pay attention to it. And he calls me back 6 months later and go, well, I fixed it, but I think I'm going to sell it. You want to buy it? And the price was right. And I went and looked at it, and I had a tick, had some things to do, but my fiance at the time, my wife, was like, that car was your baby. Like, that was you. You need to just get it. And I did. And I spent a bunch of time fixing it up. And me rebuilding the car was therapeutic because I never want to get rid of it. I'm going to put 1 million miles on this thing. It's still a great car. It's still a total hooligan car, but it's very reliable. They say you can't keep a good man down, and you can't keep a good car down. And so for me, my favorite car forever, daily driver, is my 97 Dodge Viper GTS.
Ferrari Enzo is the successor to the F50. It's what people often refer to as a supercar or a halo car. It is named after the founder of the company, Enzo Ferrari. 660 horsepower. I don't even remember how much torque. That's just something you can look up on the internet. So Luca de Montezemolo said they were going to do the same thing that they did with the F50. When the F50 came out, they said they would make 349. One less than we know we can sell, was the quote. When the Enzo was announced, Luca said the same thing. We're going to make 349, one less than we know we can sell. When pictures of it debuted, demand was so intense that at the last minute, Ferrari decided to ramp up production from 349 to 399. And then after that, they made one for the Pope, and they said, that's it. 400 cars, that's it. There are considerably more. I know of at least 500, and I have it on really good authority that I'm still missing 3 dozen from my database. So the Enzo came out at a time where its competition was cars like the Porsche Carrera GT and the Mercedes McLaren SLR, in the same way that the LaFerrari's competition with the likes of the P1. My favorite cars are Ferraris, and my favorite Ferraris are Enzos. And my favorite Enzos are black Enzos. Perhaps the most well-known black Enzo in the world is a car that started life as a red Enzo. On 21 February 2006, Stefan Fat Steffi Eriksson wrecked a red Enzo, 135564, on PCH. It was like late one night. Apparently him and his cohorts were out drinking, maybe getting inebriated in other ways. At the end of the night, they decided they would go out and race. Fat Steffi was in the Enzo, and someone else was in some sort of Mercedes. They are flying down PCH. I don't know who won the race or whatever happened with that, but at one point, Fat Steffi lost control of the Enzo, and he hit a telephone pole. He hit a telephone pole so hard that the Enzo split in half, and the telephone pole bloop, went upside down. And it's still that day, the next morning, it was still standing, just 180 degrees from how it had been installed. And the car was completely split in half. There were Enzo pieces strewn about PCH for at least 100 yards. At least. It's a conservative estimate. For those of you who have not driven up and down PCH, it is a beautiful drive. But there are parts of it where if you're going fast enough and you don't know what you're doing, you will catch air and you will launch your car into the air. Police reports of the accident and independent reports are widely varied. Evidence suggests that he launched the car into the air, 50 feet maybe, and hit close to the top of the telephone pole, and that's what made it flip 180 degrees. All of that other stuff notwithstanding, I think it speaks to the structural soundness of the car. That, even at that speed, at that impact, having launched the car 50 feet in the air, hit a telephone pole, split the car in half, and he walked away with a bloody lip. He crashes this thing. Immediately, he wants to avoid any responsibility, so he hops into the passenger seat before the cops arrive, and when they do arrive, he explains to them that the driver, a guy named Dietrich, has jumped out of the car and fled into the woods of PCH. It was later determined that he was the driver and that he was lying about this Dietrich. fellow. When the car crashed, the airbag hit him in the face and it busted his lip. They matched the blood on the airbag to his blood. So he was determined to be the operator of the vehicle that night during the accident. So in reality, there were two people in the car. Fat Steffi was the one driving. His passenger was a guy named Trevor Carney, who has had his own legal troubles with California. It took Beverly Hills Police 17 months to find him after the accident, and they arrested him in 2007. In addition to being affiliated with the Uppsala Mafia in Sweden, Eriksson was known for these half-assed attempts at legitimate business, including a handheld video game of some kind called Gizmondo, which apparently was a huge flop. When Eriksson came to the United States, he didn't bring one Enzo, he brought two. He had 135564, the red one he wrecked on PCH, and he had a black one, 137331. Beautiful car, and it's now back in Europe. Both cars were financed through some European bank on the condition that he would not leave the country with the cars, after which he immediately imported both of them to America. After the accident, he was arrested. The remains of the Enzo were apparently in Beverly Hills Police impound for several years. The black Enzo was repatriated with the European bank. So officially, Ferrari says that they took the remains of this wreckage and repaired them, repainted the car, and it's fine again. The reality of the situation, and this is not the first time they've done this, Ferrari just built a new Enzo and assigned it the old VIN, the VIN from the wrecked car, which is something that they've done on a number of occasions, including Dar Jamail in Texas, Gary Eisenberg in California, who had a heart attack and died behind the wheel of his Enzo, and it was on fire with him in it. So there's a rumor that the black Enzo that now wears the same VIN as the red Enzo that was wrecked was a Ferrari factory prototype. And they said, okay, we can spare this one. We'll just, we'll fix it up a little bit. We'll make it newish. We'll give it the VIN of the red one, and, we'll move on. I don't know if it's true that they used a prototype or if they built a brand new car. What I do know is that they did not fix the wreckage, the red one. And even if they did, who would buy it? Who would buy a refurbished Enzo whose tub was cracked in half? How does anybody believe this story? Ferrari built a new one, gave it the same VIN, and it has a few upgrades. It has power windows. I think the AC has been reconditioned. It's got a screen for a backup camera. It was owned for a while by a guy in France. Whenever a car is wrecked, that usually means that there is one less of that model. But that is not the case here. In this situation, there is one more. Almost like that mythical thing where you cut one head off and two more appear. But that's always been the case with Ferrari production numbers, especially limited production numbers. They say one thing and then there exists in reality something else entirely.
I ended up having to pay $67 to crash an Aventador. A couple of months ago, I was browsing through Facebook and I happened across a shared Facebook Marketplace post from British Columbia, Canada. And it's for a Lamborghini hood emblem, which I don't have a current need for, but there was something very interesting about this hood emblem. It was surrounded by Arancio Argos bumper material. So that meant that it was from an Aventador, not from a Gallardo or a Mercy, where the hood emblem is actually on the hood. The hood emblem of an Aventador is on the front bumper. And it was beautifully broken off around this emblem. And I immediately recognized it as something that went missing from me back in 2013. And so I inquired of the seller, I'm like, where did you get this thing? And he says, somebody in town gave it to me. They work at a local shop. I don't know where they got it, but it's just been sitting on my desk for the last few years. I thought I'd try to sell it or trade it for something interesting. And I think he was asking like 95 Canadian dollars, whatever that Monopoly money is. And I said, well, look, I want it. Here's my address. Will you ship it to me? And he's like, nope, not gonna ship it. I'm like, come on, it's not hard. You just go to this FedEx or whatever, just ship it to me. Absolutely refused. I said, well, I've got a friend that lives not too terribly far from you, I think. Dave from Daily Driven Exotics and Damon, they live up there. I asked Dave, do you have any reason to be in Maple Ridge, British Columbia sometime soon? And he said, you know what? Next weekend, I'm going to be driving through there. I don't mind stopping and meeting this guy. So we get in touch. He says, yes, I will meet your friend. He can pay me for it and he can have it. A couple days prior to that, he absolutely goes dark, quiet. We can't get a hold of him at all. And so Dave does his trip, comes back, doesn't get it. Darn it. So I continue to ping this guy every few days like, hey, I really do want this thing. I don't care how you got it. I'll pay you a little more. I'll give you $100 US, much more valuable currency. And he said, no, I just don't want to ship it. So finally, literally after about 2 months, he agrees to let me send him a box with a return shipping label so that he can just open it, put this in, take out his birthday card with $100 to avoid any suspicion of why we might be sending cash across the border, and he would send it back to me. And so I do that, he sits on it for a few days, but it does finally show up. It really meant a lot to me because it represented probably some of the highest stakes shrewd negotiations that I've ever had to do, and it was a very significant time in my life because, again, it happened early in December of 2013, which was just a short time after I had set the Cannonball record. That happened October 19th and 20th of 2013, and we had released a story on Jalopnik. Doug DeMuro wrote the article on October 31st of 2013. So throughout November was just an amazing month for me. Obviously, the story just went nuts, it went everywhere, and it helped me sell a ton of cars. Now, it had kind of been a tense time because all the phone calls from the media and everything came into the dealership, which made it really hard for everybody else to sell cars. But all my customers were calling me, and I was able to pivot those conversations towards car deals, and we were able to sell a lot. That was my best month ever at the dealership. I made almost $50,000 in commissions. The best month I ever heard anybody have at the dealership. And so we had sold a bunch of cars, one of which was our first 2014 Lamborghini Aventador LP720-4 50th anniversary car. So that was the Giallo Maggio car, bright yellow, and we had taken it on trade an Arancio Argos 2012 Aventador. Now, it was not the one that Stradman eventually bought. Many people, when I told this story for the first time a few years ago on the channel, were like, I think you crashed Stradman's Aventador. That was not it, different VINs, but Stradman has pretty much identically specified car. So this was the first time that we had ever owned as a dealership a pre-owned Aventador. We were still delivering new Aventadors that had been ordered before we had delivered the first one. And so it was kind of interesting for us to have one that we could actually drive a little bit because we didn't want to put miles on pre-ordered new cars, but this one had 1,000, 1,500 miles. So it was okay for us to take it to the occasional car show, put a few miles on it, let somebody who was thinking about ordering a car actually drive it. But I was already working a couple of deals because, again, it was pretty rare for us to have a pre-owned Aventador and one that somebody could buy without having to wait at all. And generally, when a friend of the owner of the dealership or a friend of the general manager would show up, the responsibility would kind of fall on me to give them a ride around the block in a car if they wanted it. And that happened 1,000 times or so in the 6 years that I worked there. And I would tell them about the car and about what the dealership and all the stuff. And so that happened this day. And so again, early December 2013, this guy shows up, friend of the owner of the dealership. He's not there. So the general manager comes to me and says, Ed, will you give this guy a ride around the block in that Aventador? I said, it's 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. This is Metro Atlanta. Traffic is just gridlocked. You want me to take this guy around in traffic in an Aventador? He said, yep, that's what I want you to do. I said, all right, well, the boss says so. I'll pull it around. So I go back, grab the car, and I pull it up front. And out of the front door walks this guy with his kid, who's 7 or 8 years old. I said, well, we only got one seat. Which of you wants to go? And I assume he's going to let his kid go for the ride. He says, no, why don't we just let him sit in my lap? We'll all both buckle in and go. And I'm like, I don't think that sounds like a very good idea. And so I went back inside, asked the general manager, I said, look, they both want to go. They want to put the kid in his lap. And I was like, that doesn't seem like a good idea. He said, just do it. Lamborghini Atlanta is on Roswell Road in Sandy Springs, and it's a huge road, but at this point, it is absolutely and utterly gridlocked. Now, there's 2 lanes in each direction. There's a suicide lane in the middle for people turning left in either direction, and on each side, there's a turn lane. Generally, insurance stipulates where you can test drive cars, and so our route was to go up to Northridge, loop down 400 around the MARTA station and come back. And that has no unaided left turns. It's pretty much all rights. And if you do have to make a left, there's a red light. So it's designed to be safe and controlled. But there was another way that we could just kind of loop around 2 or 3 miles and get back to the dealership just on surface streets. Again, all right turns and pretty easy roads to be on. But that involved making the first right rather than going a little bit further. And so this is maybe a 1/4 mile from the dealership. And so we sit in traffic for a few minutes and I'm like, look, we're just gonna circle around and go back, and he's fine with that. And so we're talking about the car and thinking this is gonna be a pretty undramatic ride as I move into the right turn lane that services a lot of local businesses and a couple of apartment complexes. As I'm going through this, not very fast, I see a guy to my left slam on his brakes and start waving somebody through. And I start braking because I see a 2001 Chrysler Sebring convertible come barreling through my lane. And I almost get stopped. I'm probably going 7 miles an hour when I tap this guy's car with the front center of the bumper just in front of his right rear wheel. And he proceeds pretty much uninterrupted into the apartment complex, but he was full tilt across the lane. So he stops, I don't know, 50, 100 feet past us. Kind of stumbles out of the car, but I thought, all right, this is just gonna be a little bit of paint work. Unfortunately, the car thought otherwise. It pops both airbags in our faces, tensions the seat belts, readjusts the seats to a position it thought was more safe, breaks the steering column loose so it's all flimsy, rolls down the windows, turns on the flashers, turns off the radio, and absolutely refuses to restart. So this was the first time I'd been hit in the face with an airbag, and in fact, other than sliding Mona into the tree, it was the only accident I've had in the last 15 years or so. And so I was like, man, this really stinks. But the kid is just screaming, which fortunately he still had the ability to do. But I'm kind of shaking it off. I'm like, is that kid okay? And he's like, yeah, I think so. It just, scared him. And so we get out, and there's already a crowd formed, and there's already a traffic jam to our left, and even more so that it ended up going now back almost 5 miles. And there's people screaming, that Lamborghini hit you, he's gonna have to buy you a house. I'm like, all right, everybody just calm down. Of course, the police station, as we've talked about, was right across the street from the dealership, which was handy in the cases of the urine bandit, and we'd let them, borrow cars for parades, as we've talked about as well. So they show up almost immediately, but I call the dealership. I'm like, hey, why don't you send somebody? This kid's freaking out. Why don't you just take them back to the dealership? I'll stay here, deal with the car. We're gonna have to get it towed anyway. And so I'll deal with the cops, deal with that, and deal with this guy. And again, he gets out of the car a little bit shaken up, but he is huge, this guy that was driving the Sebring. I mean, I'm 6.5 feet tall. He's at least as tall as me, easily another 100 pounds, maybe more. And apparently, I guess what had happened is he wasn't seat belted, and he had floored the car so aggressively that his foot was against the firewall, and he had kind of sprained his right ankle. So he's sitting on the curb, occasionally trying to walk it off. And, again, nobody is gravely hurt, but there is quite a scene going on. In fact, the picture that I have of this accident was from Wrecked Exotics. One of the people driving by had taken a picture, and I think they'd put a description that it was like one of Rob from Gotham Dream Cars rental cars, which it certainly was not. The car won't move, won't restart. It's just sitting there, doors up, and everybody's taking pictures. So, okay. It was technically my fault, and I'm not trying to hide from that, because I was driving across a gore that had been painted 20 years prior in front of this apartment complex as signs. Well, the cops show up, and they want actually the guy to come back and tell us again what happened, and that's fine, whatever. So I end up getting a ticket for failure to yield, not being in not a lane, but just failure to yield. I guess I should have stopped for him to blast through, whatever. And for having an improperly seatbelted passenger, which the father also got. We end up dealing with it. He sits in an ambulance for a minute, doesn't want to go. Everybody's okay. And I grab this off of the ground and end up just throwing it in the passenger seat, figuring the tow truck will bring it, I'll grab it. It'll be the perfect souvenir of a very strange day in my life. Now, unfortunately, the car went immediately to the body shop where it sat until it was repaired, and this was the first thing to go missing as it went there. So I never saw it again, and I always wanted it until I saw it pop up on Facebook Marketplace. And so this began a really kind of complicated situation, because unfortunately this was not the first accident of the year for us at the dealership. Less than a year prior, the owner of the dealership had totaled a Bentley Continental Super Sports, being on his phone running a red light. The general manager of the dealership had totaled a C63 on a test drive when he was distracted. And so the insurance was not going to be happy that we had another claim. Now, fortunately, I already had a deal working on this Aventador. This guy was not that upset that it was going to need a new bumper and some airbags. It was just, he was going to do a lot of modifications to it, put on new bumpers, wings, wheels, all the things. And it was interesting because he was going to be trading us, I think it was an 03 Mercy in Verta Ithaca that was previously owned by Busta Rhymes. It was on MTV Cribs. It had all this flip mode stuff, crazy wheels, LED lights everywhere. And this was kind of just the start of a brightly colored manual transmission Lamborghini being really special and really valuable. So that was also going to be a great piece of inventory, which we were excited to get, but I kind of had to keep pushing him off because the repairs took forever. The thing that really took forever was the hood latch. Apparently, since it's a safety related item, it was on eternal back order and it took forever. So the car was down for like 6 months, but again, I sold it without us losing money, and that was absolutely perfect. The problem was that this guy calls, the guy who I had hit in the Sebring calls and says that his mother had just gotten $25,000 from being in an accident and that he had some expenses coming up that he needed help with, and he wanted $50,000. And I was like, look, I mean, yes, our insurance is going to fix your car. It is your prerogative, and many people will tell you that you can sue us for additional damages, but that's going to take years, and you're just going to have to work it out with them. I understand that you have real expenses, and I have no interest in hanging you out to dry, but if I write you a check today for those expenses, then I'm admitting guilt. My insurance would absolutely kill me. They'd sue me for it. Let's talk about what you really need. I don't really think it's $50,000. It sounds like you need to pay some rent, buy some groceries, maybe miss a little bit of work as you're going to a doctor's appointment to have your ankle checked out. Like, I get that those are real expensive, but that sounds like more like $2,500, not $50,000. And he's like, yeah, I guess so. We kind of went back and forth, and of course he was a shrewd negotiator. So after some negotiation, we ended up right smack dab in the middle at $3,500. And I said, well, I can get you a check for that right now, but I'm going to need you to sign something that releases us from future liability that I can give to my insurance and tell them that I'm not an idiot for doing so. And he's like, no, that's great. He was very excited to be able to get the money immediately. That more than covered his expenses. He was very, very happy. And so he comes by the next day and picks up his check. And actually that morning, I got a call from the guy who had waved him through, who had stopped traffic, formed a hole so this guy could blast right through. And he's like, can I talk to whoever was driving that Lamborghini? And they sent it to me, and he's like, man, I am so sorry. That was 100% my fault. I didn't see you, and I just saw he had his turn signal on, and I just stopped and waved him right through. He couldn't have seen you. I know you couldn't see him, and so, man, I just feel absolutely terrible. I said, well, so do we, but, things happen. Everybody's okay. Everything's fine. The kid's fine, most importantly, and honestly, he loves this story. I think he's probably better at telling it than I am, and so he's told all his friends. He loves it. He had the only thing, he had a little bit of an abrasion across his neck from the seatbelt. Again, one of the stupider things that I've ever done. I certainly wouldn't do it now that I have a kid almost exactly that kid's age, but everybody's okay, and we end up with an interesting souvenir for it years and years later. And so the guy comes by, he picks up his check, he's happy, everybody's fine. I think we may have helped him find another car. I think he used part of it as a down payment. And so, of course, a couple of weeks later, I've got to go to court for this to deal with my tickets. Well, I get to go to court. I love going. I show up and get to talk to the solicitor. I explain the circumstance. He's like, oh yeah, that intersection, which in those couple of weeks had been repainted very brightly with new stripes that you would not miss as easily. And so I guess this happened literally daily, that somebody had some kind of an issue driving through that turn lane, because I was in a row of cars doing it every time I drive by it. I see people using that. So regardless, it was my fault, not trying to avoid it. And I said, look, I did that, but maybe we could talk about it. Just like any attorney that you might hire through Off the Record or one of these ticket services they just try to make it like a rules of the road violation. So I think that's what it is. He gave me a $67 fine and a rules of the road violation that was no insurance reporting, no points, no nothing. So no big deal. And so I said, but on this other ticket, now I got a ticket for this improperly seatbelted passenger, which I understand shouldn't have been that way, but his dad also got that ticket. I said, isn't that double jeopardy or something for us both to be convicted of the same crime? And it's not double jeopardy, by the way. He said, yeah, you know what it is. And so that doesn't make sense. So we'll just throw that one out. So I ended up having to pay $67 to crash an Aventador, which was kind of wild. So nobody was really that worse for wear, but the insurance was quite upset about it. And that, combined with the other two accidents, meant that we ended up having to find new insurance, which meant that we all got to have defensive driving school. So they sent in an instructor that talked to us all about what we should be doing and gave us a test, and only one of us from the dealership got 100 on that. It was me. But that is ultimately the story of the prodigal Lamborghini emblem and how I got it back.
The margin for error here is really high risk. I could hit a $2 million car. So I get a phone call that says, do you want to be in a rap video? And it didn't take me long to say, of course, I want to be in a rap video. And this is in Los Angeles. I spend a lot of time in LA to film our content. It's sunny, it's beautiful, it makes people feel good. I love palm trees, other people love palm trees. You just have access to things like, do you want to be in a rap video? I don't know why I don't question half the time when I get offered opportunities. Who is it? Where is it? What do you want me to do? I just thought they want to use your car in the background, and maybe they'll have you do some of your donuts, stunt driving stuff. I just said, yeah, sure, that'd be great. Send me the location. So we show up, and it's this very, what appears to be industrial, but not a good neighborhood. And I'm thinking, am I even in the right place? And if I'm not, I need to get out of here right away, because someone's gonna run up to me with a gun, tell me to get out of my car, and steal my Lamborghini. Thankfully, I was in the right location. they had rented this warehouse to shoot this set, for the rap video. And I'm picturing like, I don't know, like 50 Cent, Drake, some big label rapper. And I pull in, and it ends up turning out to be a rap video for the YouTube star Jake Paul. And I was still like, well, this is really cool. I can relate. I have a YouTube channel that's growing quite well. Maybe hanging around this young man, I can see how he operates. I could learn a thing or two because he's very, very successful. He's in the 17 million plus subscriber range, and he does hundreds of millions of views, and he makes a significant amount of money. I believe at 21 years old, which was listed, this guy was making like $12 million a year. So I thought he knew something I didn't know. This would be perfect opportunity and a lot of fun. We go in, and they have a whole bunch of cars lined up, and they're kind of shooting a bunch of, previous scenes. And we just stand on the side and wait for our turn until we get summoned to do whatever it is we were asked to do. And it's not long after, about an hour goes by, he comes over and he says hello. He says, thank you for coming. I'm really excited to have you guys. Let me know what you would like to do. If you'd like to participate in the background of the video or dance or anything like that, you're more than welcome to. And I thought, I'm awful at dancing, but at least I can move to the beat. And we had some fun for about an hour until it got to the point where he goes, okay, so you can do drifting in your Lamborghini or donuts. Could you drift around another car if I stood on top of it? I said, yeah, most likely I could. Looks like there's enough room in here. There's definitely in a warehouse, there are these steel fixtures that are the supports, the foundation of the building, if you will, that are definitely immovable objects that you would definitely not want to hit. But I kind of eyed it up and thought, yeah, you put a car there, I could slide it around the car. It's going to be close, but it's not going to be undoable. Then they raise the bar. They go, well, we also want to put some cars kind of in the background in a semicircle. Would you be cool with that? I said, yeah, I think I could do that, but they need to be at this distance. And we're kind of figuring it all out. This is all real loose. I'm just doing this by eye and feel. I don't have a measuring tape out, and nothing's really scientific. Then they go, is that car right there going to be a problem? That one sitting right there? And I said, the $2 million all carbon fiber Mansory Bugatti Veyron that belongs to my buddy? They said, yeah. And I didn't really want to be the guy in front of, there's about 100 people on this production set. About 55 people who worked with the Jake Paul crew and his, all those people, and then a bunch of other people helping out. And they're all standing there looking at me while he's asking me this question. I didn't want to be like, yeah, no, I don't feel comfortable doing that. So I just went with, yeah, no problem. I got this. And so I'm starting to actually get a little nervous because this is a really big deal. I'm feeling confident, but like the margin for error here is really high risk. I could hit a $2 million car. I could hit my other friend's Lamborghini, which is what they chose for him to stand on top of, my friend Alex Choi's car. And then, if I hit the car, what happens if I knock this guy over? He's high profile, you know what I mean? And I kind of went with it. And we made sure everybody was standing back, so at least I wasn't going to hit anybody else. And they go, action. And the first couple of runs I go to take, we're in a warehouse with polished concrete that is not cleaned, and there's dust all over it, and it's very, very slippery. And I get about a halfway drift and I lose it, and the car spins out. It's not a big deal, low speeds. So I say, sorry, give me a moment, just gonna get the feel of the angle and we'll get it all down. And I go for a second run and I do a full drift around it, but as I do the first run, every time I go around, the exhaust is basically clearing all that dust off the surface because it's pushing it all off. And the tires, as they're spinning, is putting just a little bit of rubber down on top of that concrete, which is creating a little more grip. And I do a second circle around the car, and I'm noticing two things. I'm having to really make sure that my angle is on point on the same line, because if not, it gets really slippery and I'm starting to go a lot faster, or essentially I'm getting really close to the Bugatti or some of the other cars. And I was just really concerned that obviously I don't want to hit the Bugatti. If I'm going to hit anything, I got to make sure that I lose control past the Bugatti and spin out and just hit the BMW M4. So we're going, and I don't know how many of these laps these guys want me to do. They don't say when I'm gonna stop. So I ended up doing like 6 drifting laps around a Lamborghini with Jake Paul, like, you know, rapping on top of this Lamborghini that my friend owns. And every lap I'm going about 5 miles an hour faster. So multiply that by 6 laps. I start going about 30 miles an hour in a fairly slow drift. All of a sudden I'm doing 60, and I'm actually moving pretty quick. And as I'm moving, I'm also having to compensate for the angle at which I'm coming between that Bugatti and that Lamborghini. And I'm looking at that, like I'm just hyper focused on that. And I don't notice off to the right between 2 of those immovable beam structures for the warehouse, there is this other kind of prop that is made out of a metal frame and some like tin roofing that has graffiti all over it. It's just a prop. It's like a background, kind of make the set look cool. That is actually sitting about 2.5 feet further out from the posts I was eyeballing to my right. And I had just drifted about 6 feet outside of the line I was taking so that I could hit the angle between the Bugatti and the Lamborghini without hitting anything. I drifted outside of that line, and the very back of my car, the actual quarter panel ever so lightly grazed that prop, which was made out of steel. And right after that is my wing, this big, huge chassis mounted wing, which I thought was really cool, makes the car look really unique, ends up completely smashing into the side of this prop. Luckily not hitting the prop and moving it and knocking it over onto anybody, because there were people standing around it, but it just demolishes the wing. It's all made of carbon fiber and aluminum, and it just buckled and ended up looking like metal was bent, and everybody in the room just went dead silent. I came to a stop, and I thought in that moment, I've been in this situation before, I've wrecked stuff on this car before, I've made mistakes. Just get out and own it and laugh, and no one's hurt, make sure no one's hurt. And I got out and I was like, everybody okay? And everybody was like, yeah, we're all okay. Are you okay? And I was like, it's just a car. And Jake Paul, I'm pretty sure his line was, you know, his rap video title was Randy Savage. So he comes running over and he goes, Randy Savage, we broke a Lamborghini. And sure enough, we definitely demolished the rear wing of that car into pieces. And yeah, you know, about a month later, we had another one fabricated at the cost of $2,500. And if you had never seen that video, you would never been the wiser.